Greetings, Poe fans. Welcome to another edition of Poe Unplugged. I am Carmen Bolden.
And I am Jeannie Smith, and we are
The Poetastic Two.
Come zoom with us into the Unbook Club dedicated to the works of Mr. Edgar Allan Poe.
All right. Good evening and welcome to Poe Unplugged, where we're going to talk about Edgar Allan Poe's The Bells. And we have Holly Michele with us, and she is an author and illustrator and has her own Edgar Allan Poe reimagined series. And Holly's going to definitely give us a lot of information about all of that here in just a second. Did everybody have time to read The Bells this evening?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good deal. One kind of neat thing I looked up is that, I think most of y'all probably know this was Poe's last poem to be published, and it was actually published posthumously because, hold on a second, he died before it got published, but it took him about a year to write. He went over and visited a lady. Her name was Marie Louise Shue, because he was having like inspiration issues. He was just kind of stuck. And so when they were visiting, having tea, there were lots of bells going on. And he even remarked that all these bell noises were making him not be able to focus. And so she actually wrote down like TheBells by E.A. Poe, and then started talking about the bells, the little silver bells. And so that's where that poem kind of got started. So I don't know if everybody knew that or not. So I wanted to share that. Had anybody heard that origin story?
I heard a different origin story.
Oh, okay. Well, share that. Share what you
So
heard.
I don't know where I heard it from, but I know it's when his wife was really sick. I thought like his nurse had it was like inspiration from her, because wasn't she like wearing bells, or she had robes, and like there was like the carriage had bells. I had heard that as in because he was having writer's block. That was part of it, but he was having writer's block, and he was just like, I can't think of anything to write. And while she was there, he kind of came up with the idea of the bells, with hearing them somehow.
Okay.
I can't remember if it was on her person or if it was like the carriage with the horses.
That's interesting. And, just like with anything, there's probably lots of different stories, behind it from the lore of, how he did write it. So that's very interesting too.
Yeah. Has
anybody else heard either one of those before?
Just the one you were telling me about. My English teacher told me that.
Okay. So you had heard the one I had just shared?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the one that she, when she was teaching the poem in class, that's what she started with, and then we went right into the poem.
Okay. Very cool. I wonder which one is true.
I don't know.
Yeah, I have no idea where
I don't either.
From. So
I don't either. And Holly, now that you say that, I think I may have heard that version too.
Yeah.
And so, Jeannie, did you find anything on that?
Well, there's always certain things like on the website that you posted where the bells were. They talk about Sarton's magazine, how he did die before they posted it, because the way they typeset it, he wasn't able to dictate how it was put, and it actually ended up being put in two different columns. But as for everything else being posthumously, that part of his life, especially towards the end, whenever he died, there's been so many different rumors, so many different.
That's true.
Dictates of how it actually happened, what he had written, when he had written. It kind of goes down to, it's one of those things of lore. Which one was actually true? Maybe they're all a little bit true. They just all been spliced, cut apart, which is typical for that type of history.
Yeah, that's very true.
Someone like Poe, who wasn't exactly well loved, and how his arch nemesis was the one that ended up posting his plays, or not plays, but his works, and getting for it. So
yeah, well, in his obituary and about a biography and all of that with Griswold, and with them, and then even the Allens, I think at one point throughout Poe's life were telling things that were not necessarily true either, and making kind of like covering up some of the things that are not as nice for society, I guess you could say. And
it didn't make it really pertaining to that sort of status quo kind of thing.
Yeah.
And also with his poem, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I was
that's okay. Go ahead.
I don't think he wrote it within one sitting period, like normal, most people works for a long period of time. And I think he wrote it over a specific time period because of the different types of bells he incorporates, like with different aspects. And to me, when I read it, it's like he was traveling and he was just writing as what he was listening to.
Yeah.
Time. So it's more like a traveling journal type aspect of the poetry that I read into it. So
yeah, I could definitely see that. Jay Christensen had posted, I heard the same, that he had writer's block and the university's bells was inspiration after Virginia's death. And so, and I'm going to admit Leela in. She just joined us. Give her a moment. Yeah. Hey, Leela, we already started, and so we're just talking about kind of a little bit of the background of where Poe had got the inspiration for the poem "The Bells," and some of those types of things. And I think one other thing I read about I think I'm trying to remember. Let me look it back up. One of the sets of bells is now kind of referred to as like Edgar Allan Poe's bells. I can't remember which ones they are because he was in Fordham in New York when he wrote this, or kind of finalized it. And I don't remember which set, but there were lots of bells that around the area that you could kind of associate with ringing and giving off all of these noises to kind of either make him have writer's block or give him the inspiration. Let's see. And I think it may be the bells at the chapel of what is now Fordham University. Those are the ones that are called Poe's bells in like the local tradition around that area. So I thought that was kind of cool too. So just kind of interesting. So what did everybody think of the poem?
I enjoyed it. How am I going to put this? It kind of was kind of significant at this point when I read it, because it starts out like I associated the beginning as like the beginning of, his childhood, and then it goes into maturity, and then it moves on to maturity and then death. Yeah. Just the way it started out light when I read it, and it seemed to get darker as I progressed through it.
I totally agree. And it definitely, you could kind of signify that, if you had a person's lifetime going through the silver bells at the beginning of childhood, going into kind of the golden years, and then the brazen bells of maybe thinking about, past regrets or anything kind of thing in your life that, you should have done. You're getting to that stage of, before the autumn of your years, kind of quoting from Frank Sinatra, and then going into the iron bells of like, kind of the era of, being elderly or something like that. Definitely. Anybody else thoughts?
Well, I did pick up on one other thing. I noticed that the bells started out like softer, like the tinkle, and you know what I'm saying, like what they're made out of. and
Mhm.
then toward the end, the bells were stronger. Am I making sense?
Yes, yes.
Okay. It's been a while since I had read it. I mean, high school was what, 35 years ago?
Let's not bring that out there, Keith. We'll talk about that. All right, we're gonna say it was just yesterday. All right.
It was yesterday.
Yes.
Exactly.
Let's stay in the golden bells era. We're still in the
Exactly.
golden bells. All right. Any other thoughts about that? Like agree, disagree, or any other things that you guys picked up on?
Yeah,
Well-
definitely stages. Yeah, stages of life for me. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those poems that's just super fun to read out loud. It was meant to be read out loud. I had read somewhere he kind of even designed it as meant to be a song or sing-songed.
Yes.
So it's it's one of those ones, like, if you read it out loud, it's just a lot. It's like the Dr. Seuss thing, you know what I mean? I know Poe came before him, but just fun to, it's fun to read out loud.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I kind of put my own like rhythm with it when I was rereading it, because it kind of made it fun to do that. Definitely.
Well, I'm going to go a little dark here, so.
Well, of course, Jeannie, you always go
Of
dark.
course, I always go dark. That's my thing. I can't help it. It's just my way.
It's all good.
I view this poem and always have as the stages of grief.
Okay.
As like in the first stanza, it talks about the sleigh bells, the silver bells. To me, that's always about denial. That you're thinking about how this can't be, happening. It's one of the happiest times. You're just going to totally forget about anything else that's going on in the world. And it's all about the soft and the quiet and the denial of it. And then you go into, one and talking about how it's the swells and now the bells are starting to seep in because that second stage of grief is coming in where you get the point of, trying to get with the anger, and then you go with the total disarray, the denial, the anger. And then finally in the end, the very last stanza, it has all about, the kneeling, the ghouls, the death, where you finally just come to acceptance of, death is the last part of life and it's the last part of grief. And because, it's Edgar.
Yeah, and I can definitely see that, especially with the last line, to the moaning and the groaning of the bells.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Yeah, you definitely went dark. You definitely went dark. But I can see that. I can totally see that though.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I can too. By looking at it that direction, I can see it. It makes absolute sense. Of course, when I talked to my sister about it, she compared it to the changing of the seasons.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's how she looked at it.
Well, and that goes along with because one of my favorite, favorite might be a little too, adding, but one of the poems out of the Bible from Ecclesiastes is to everything there is a season, and it's got all the different things and, life comes with death and that kind of thing. So, Poe, we all know, is very much a man who had struggles with everything from life to death. And so it just seems that when you hear those bells, the different ringing in your head kind of clangs and knocks out different ideas, different feelings. And that's just one of the things that I think about. So
yeah, sorry, I had to ring my bell.
Yeah, ringing the bells.
I can say one thing. Reading it out loud, when I read it out loud, I was okay with it. I did okay. I'm like, the sound of my own voice wasn't getting on my nerves. Well, then I found it on YouTube where they had different people reading it. And I thought I was going to lose my absolute mind this afternoon listening to other people read it. I'm like, you've got to stop this.
Yeah.
Well, Keith, was there one on YouTube that you thought was like the best version, just so people can go seek that out?
The best version to me personally, and it's because I'm a big fan of his, but it was a version read in the likeness of Christopher Lee. Christopher Lee didn't do it,
Oh,
but the
okay.
guy read it in his likeness, because we know how Christopher Lee was when,
Yes.
in his acting, and he did the Raven that I love so much. I've kept a copy of that saved
Mhm.
on my computer. So, and that version, I was like, oh, I'm okay with this. I can handle this one, because it wasn't
Okay.
all over the place like some of the readings that I listened to this afternoon.
Oh, very cool. I wrote that down, and that's why I wanted like, if to share that way. And I may go here in just a second and find it and put it in the chat for everybody. Did you find any versions that people were singing it? That was one thing, because I didn't
Yes,
even think to look for this.
yes. There's actually there was a guy that made it into a song back in the '60s. It was like a folk song. I cannot,
Makes sense.
I can't remember his name, but and then there was a choir that did it, and one I was just, me, you give me a topic, I'm on YouTube all day long.
Right. Yes.
Just looking and seeing the different ways things are done. But it set to music, it was interesting. But the choir, when they did it without music. Oh, acapella, is that it?
Yes.
Yeah, and the way the beginning, we're going really big fast in the beginning, the tinkling of the bells and all that, the bells, kind of happy and joyous, and then it
Hmm.
kind of slowed down and got a little heavy toward the end. The
Okay.
bells, the bells. You not that I'm doing that quite as well as they did, but I mean, it was enjoyable. I mean, so
Okay.
the singing part of the folk song one, I didn't particularly care for, but
Yeah. Well, I just found it on YouTube, the version in the vein of Christopher Lee. I added
that's it.
that in the chat. And so, yeah, I definitely will listen to that later. That's really cool. Any other thoughts on the poem? Did you all like it?
So I kind of agree with what Holly and Jeannie said. When I read it, it kind of just reminded me of this guy was looking at his life, and it started out, it was okay. But then as it continued, stuff just got worse and worse, his outlook on his life. So it's kind of like a combination between those two. Because you start reading, you're like, oh, this is cute. And you're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? So I took it as a perspective of someone, the way they viewed their life, and it just kept getting worse.
Okay. Yeah, definitely so. And that definitely fits with Poe's life, if you think about the stages of what all he went through, with all the loss that he had and everything. So yeah, totally get that. So on a lighter note, let's kind of move to Holly's TheBells, and do the little show
cool.
yes, and you can find that on Amazon, and I'll put a link in the chat when she's talking about it. But I've read it, and Holly, I loved it. It was adorable.
Thank you. I
But
appreciate it.
you take it away, and you kind of talk about everything.
So the whole inspiration for the bells for me came from actually my childhood. I know, Keith, you were saying that your teacher went over in class. So my introduction was a little different. We had to pick like either a poem or excerpt from something to read in front of the class. And in our book, we had a little portion from the bells, and that's what I chose. So that was kind of like, I just chose it, I memorized it, and I recited it. And to this day, I still have that section. I would be annoying and recite it to my husband. And at the time, I had always thought like that was the entire poem, not realizing it was only part of the poem. So then I discovered like, wow, it's actually quite long. And I started out as a child illustrator and author. I wanted to do something with Edgar Allan Poe. So I kind of went back to that poem for my first one. I was thinking when I read it, because I only had read an excerpt as a child again, I had thought it was actually about Christmas. Because starting with the very first verse of like the silver bells and everything, and I automatically thought Santa Claus. So I kind of stuck with that. And my goal in this kid's book is to basically introduce children to Edgar Allan Poe in a way that they can relate to. So maybe they're not getting what his original meaning was, but it's kind of like you get to see his words in the story. It's his words mixing with my words to tell a different story, but you still get all of his words. And there's like a word vocabulary section, so you can learn them. So that was kind of then my thing was with the bells. I'm not sure how many people here are familiar with the story of the Krampus.
Yes.
He's basically, he wears the chains and the bells. And I kind of just thought, like, well, this is Edgar Allan Poe as a little kid, as the main character. I'm like, well, he thinks he hears Santa's bells, but it's not Santa's bells. It's the Krampus who comes down the chimney, and he has to use his writer's wit to kind of get ahead and save all the naughty little boys and girls. So that's basically the premise of the story, told through Edgar Allan Poe's poem.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah, it's great, and she does, she is an illustrator and does her, all the artwork herself. And let me show a few things. But yeah, I loved, Holly, that you did have the as an English teacher, when I saw the vocabulary, so
Yeah,
the
read
kids
for
could,
words you never
that's
read.
nice.
yes, I was like, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah.
This is so awesome. But
And you know what's funny? In the original version, you have Carmen. I took out the tintinnulation.
yes.
And I actually put it back in, so I owe you a newer version.
Okay.
Why I did that was because I thought it's a really hard word for an adult. It'd be too hard for like the age group I was gearing towards. And
Yeah,
I kept running into these Poe people who are like, oh, well, about the word, which technically, he made up for that poem,
exactly.
which is now a word, but he had originally made it up, created the word. I won't say made it up, it took two words to come together.
Yeah.
So that's actually back in the book because all it really means is ringing. So I put it back in there. So it's actually in the newer version. Since this was the first one I did, because I was trying to stay as true to his words as possible. The only words I
Absolutely.
changed is like the word bosom. If you read anything from that time period, people love that word. It's
Yes.
just a very antiquated word today, and it's just a word that I just take out anytime I do any sort of adaptation, just because it's just not what we think of. At least it's not what I think of. So that and the tintinnulation, which I actually ended up putting back in later on.
Yeah. And I can see why you would take it out kind of initially, just because that it is a hard word, especially.
I don't know if I'm saying it, to
kids.
be honest. I'm not even sure if I'm saying it correct. I've heard people say it several different ways. So it's one of those words I shy away from because I'm like, well, am I not saying it right? Or are you not saying it right? Because it's not a word people really say and or use.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I did put it back in there just to be like, because it is a cool word. And since there is a vocabulary section, I mean, it's there for you to look up if you're like, what the heck does that mean? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. But like, here's just some more of just the artwork, and what I was holding up a minute ago was at the beginning, and what I thought was so really cool was like on here, and she's got the little bitty bells on the tree, and just really cool.
And the cat is Pluto. I don't know if you caught that, Carmen. The black cat has a little P on his necklace there.
I did.
He is a pet cat named Pluto. So
oh, yes.
Some black cat.
Oh, yes. Oh, I did. I caught it and loved it. Absolutely loved it. And she weaves in Poe's actual real brother and sister, Rosalie and Henry.
Yep.
And so I thought that was really cool too. So does anybody have questions for Holly about the bells or any of her other stories? I was going to say, please feel free to talk about some of your other stories as well, and even some of your other work, because I know you've got lots of other series and stuff.
Yeah, well, the Edgar Allan Poe reimagined series, The Bells was the first one. There's several other ones. I would say geared towards between the 5 and 10. I mean, younger, because you do get introduced to Poe young. We have that one. We have the Raven, which is an Edgar Allan Poe Christmas Carol, which is really probably one of my favorites. A Telltale Heart, which is a Edgar Allan Poe lesson in emotional awareness, which actually is my absolute favorite. But I mean, you gotta be a real big Poe fan to truly understand and appreciate that one. Because with anything where it's a little spooky, some kids, you think the kid's down with spooky books, and the parent is like, yeah, no, it's too scary for my kid. That's why I try to have pictures for you to just kind of preview the book. There's that one, and Fall of House of Usher, and hopefully soon the Oblong Box, which is going to be a Christmas mystery, will be out soon.
Fun.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds interesting. That for a Christmas mystery. I like that one. I like it.
Yeah.
I watched it the other night, late show, couldn't sleep.
Yeah, I love the story. To me, the story is so like gut wrenching. Like
Yes.
I just love that story. But I'm like, well, how do you make it geared for children? And I discovered a way, Keith. I think you'll like it.
Oh, cool. I can't wait to see it.
Yes. Oh, that will be.
Now, why did you want to gear this towards children? Was there just a moment of saying, hey, I just want to write children's and I want to gear things towards children? Or,
actually, no. I started actually writing young adult books, like long novels and fantasy. But I've always been an illustrator, and the editing process in doing an adult book is extremely lengthy, especially because I'm not a clean writer. Can't spell save my life. I know, but I'm a writer. So my sister had suggested, like, hey, like, why don't you start like drawing books, like kids books to go along with your adult one? So like, because I started with the Jersey Devils story, because I'm from New Jersey and I live on the street the Jersey Devil was born on. It's a local legend about a demon, which is right up my alley. So I started
cool.
so in the process of editing, I was like, well, let me draw a kid's book. I didn't know if I could, and it came out really good. And I had a nice reception for that, my very first children's book. I'm like, wow, well, actually a better reception for my children's books than my young adult. So I was like, all right, I really enjoy the art. It's very therapeutic to color for a living. So it kind of just started from there. And then we did like a Zombies for Children series, because again, I like all the dark stuff. And then the next book series was basically the Edgar Allan Poe one was kind of next after I kind of got my foot in the door and everything.
That is very cool. Jay Christensen said, love your books. Are you submitting for this year's Saturday Visitor Awards too?
Thank you. Yes, I'm gonna put in the Raven, which is the Edgar Allan Poe Christmas Carol.
Okay.
I particularly like that one. I think that one's especially like clever, and it has like nice tie-in with Charles Dickens, with the Raven. So I've really. That's like most of everyone in my family. It's my husband's favorite. It's my sister's, my mother's favorite. It's a really fun one, and I think the illustrations in that one are a little bit more fun as well.
Okay.
Not that the one TheBells is nice, but I got to play a little bit more with like the different Christmas themes, and I actually draw on like the original classic drawings from Gustav. I'm probably gonna kill his name, so I'm not gonna say the last name. Yeah. So I played on the original, like those classic black and white illustrations we think of with the Raven.
Yes.
I got to play with that and make it cartoonish for kids, but for the whole family. I have a lot of teachers buy the books for classroom things. So it's like a big teacher thing. So it's nice to actually kind of like, they see the illustrations like that, and when they get a little older, they can see the other more classic illustrations.
Oh, that's really cool. And I think like we talked to Holly a few minutes before everybody else kind of joined us, and Holly, you mentioned kind of the I guess triangular connection of like TheBells with Poe and Dickens, if you want to share that, because I thought that was really neat.
So I recently, to get in the Christmas mood, I've been reading Charles Dickens' classic holiday stories, and I had never read the Chimes before, which is funny because it's about Belle. So it's basically that connection too with like Edgar Allan Poe. I wrote a story about Belle, so did Charles Dickens, and kind of at TheBells in the beginning of Charles Dickens too. It starts off as like this man, like these are beautiful sounds to the man. After we've been talking about this, and then at the end, it's kind of like basically these goblins come out of TheBells and basically do show him like what his life was like, when he gives into depression. This is like, but Dickens usually has a happy, optimistic ending. You know what I mean?
Oh
So
yeah.
I don't want to give too much away if you want to go back and read it. I really enjoyed the story. I mean, no one does dialogue like Charles Dickens. But yeah, it was kind of, I thought as I was reading it, I was like interested. I was like, wow, this is kind of cool because it kind of just another kind of interesting connection to add those bells. Charles Dickens, obviously, like I said, it's actually a New Year's story more than a Christmas story.
Okay.
So it was kind of like an interesting time, because plus like with my bells, I kind of always thought as a child, like I instinctively thought Christmas. So yeah, everybody go if you want to read it. It's not very long. It's just a short story, but it was really good.
Well, cool. Yeah, I definitely am going to check that out. I think I've got a short collection of Dickens works. I've got A Christmas Carol by itself, but I have not. I've read some Dickens, but I haven't read all of them. And there's a few that I definitely want to check out.
Yeah, and that's
So
kind of
that's
how I
one
feel
of them.
too. Like I feel like, I mean, like I said to my husband, like if he's been like on the back burner for so long, I'm like, I need to like start reading these. So it's kind of what I'm reading right now.
Absolutely. And Dickens actually, tried to help Poe out,
Mhm.
in Europe when he went back, because he came over to America and Poe did get to meet him. And, he really did try to help Poe, become even more of a published author. And it just, it didn't necessarily work out. But,
Yeah, it was a cool little tie-in for me. Like I made me, I guess, appreciate and like the story, I think, even a little bit more. But yeah, it was definitely just another little interesting that they both kind of had like a story about bells.
yeah, that is awesome. And then, with, Dickens having his own raven, well, he had, I think, a couple named Grip, and then Poe, having the raven, the story, the
Yes.
poem, I should say. And if you are in Philadelphia, go to the museum there and you can see the stuffed taxidermied Grip on display. It's really cool.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he had 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Holly, one question I have for you is, have you just ever thought about maybe upping it a little bit more into the graphic novel area of doing more of a crossover, like what some of the comic books are doing now? I know it would gear toward more of a preteen, that type of area, because teaching middle school, that's kind of what they like, is the graphic novels. And I was thinking when I saw yours and read it, it would be great to put it as a storyboard graphic novel type.
Yeah, and like me personally, I absolutely love graphic novels. And I'm like a weird artist. Like I'm like cartoony, but I actually can do fine art. The only award I've ever won was actually in fine art, even though I like a pop art, graphic art style. But I actually I wanted to do kind of like the problem with graphic novels is that they always abbreviate the words, which some people are okay with. But if you ever like reading reviews on graphic novels, like, well, you change the words. Well, yeah, I have to, because it's the story is told with the picture, not with words. Like, it's more picture oriented. So I had originally wanted to do a full, like almost like a picture book graphic novel. I actually had started to do A Tale to Heart, where I was doing really like more fine art, with black and white, real sketchy, where it actually looked like a human's face versus like a cartoon blob. But then I thought to myself, like, I could actually make like a 50-page graphic novel of just illustrations, because there's so much storytelling in that, and keep all his original words and just have it like be a picture book for adults. But the problem is with that, and I hate to say it comes down to money, but it's by the time I'm done doing those illustrations, because you're talking, I had figured out I'd have to do 150 illustrations. Wow. And then print it, like, and I was like, which is not an issue, but then it's like, well, are you really going to spend like $30 for one story that you could essentially read for free online? And there's so many other graphic books out there. So that's kind of when at the point, I actually did that before the kids book. And I said to my husband, like, these are coming out really cool, but each picture like that takes almost 6 hours to do. And that's before with edit with no color, and have to be black and white. If I wanted that color, I just kind of got to the point where I was like, it is so cool, and I would love to do it. But then, like, because otherwise you're cutting the words out. And I just don't, as at this point, I just don't know if there's really a market for like an adult picture book. I mean, of course, there's a fanatic, like there's Poe fans, they're going to buy everything. But for like, it's kind of hard to just kind of bridge that gap. I want to, but as of now, it just doesn't seem practical. I mean, I would love to, though, eventually one day.
Yeah, well, I was thinking on the aspect of when we deal with the kids in our classroom that have like learning disabilities or that kind of issue, that those types of books that they struggle with comprehension, they struggle with anything reading wise, that something that visual kind of helps them learn along with it. So I thought that would be just an idea, and I didn't know if, you know, would be plausible. But like you're saying,
Yeah, I mean, I
guys,
wish.
it won't
I mean, I
work,
did.
but
Yeah, I did a couple illustrations because I did it. He started off telling the story when he was in an insane asylum and he was like all wrapped up and everything. But it's just, yeah. I mean, I started doing it. I have a friend who did a graphic novel. Lou Peck. I'm gonna say his name wrong. How you say Lou's last name? It's Lou Pesci, like the actor, right? He was okay, I think I'm gonna say his name wrong, but he did a graphic novel. I met him through my friend Leroy, who was supposed to join. I wasn't able to. He texted me, said he's sorry, but yeah, he actually did a great graphic novel with really cool illustrations. And then when I saw his illustrations, I was like, wow, this is really, really cool. And I was like, you know, like when you compare yourself to others, you're like, wow, this is really cool, Lou. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go in a different direction. You know, I was like in the middle of drawing my hand, but I was like, this is really cool.
Yeah, because wow, I was gonna say, because 6 hours, and I'm sure plus, depending on how detailed some of the illustrations would be, that's a long time.
Yeah, I have my poor disgusting fingers. I mean, you can't see them. They're all like not. I got my husband got me for Christmas like finger protectors for the book I'm working on now with color pencil. Yeah. Like 8 hours of coloring pencil, which is so fun. But then like my hands like this. So.
Yes.
Yeah, one of our closest, well, my best friend, but one of our closest friends, she is a drawing and fine arts person, and I know when she does the big paintings, like the 16 by 24s, the 30 by, and those things take anywhere from one full 12-hour to almost 2 or 3 days.
Oh, easily.
Yeah. So, and you know, doing it in a book version, as you can see, it may be smaller, but it's just a lot of fine details and those types of things. So I thank you for having dedication.
Yes.
To do that, because, you know, it makes my hand cramp with arthritis thinking about it. So
absolutely. Yeah, but I mean, your artwork is beautiful. It just, the colors are amazing, and it makes the story really pop. Definitely so. All right. Any other questions for Holly or thoughts? Any kind of thing?
Another thing I want to say is for any of you that get our journal, the Raven Journal, last month was Holly's Gothic guest debut, where we put the information on the website, where she has not just her Edgar Allan Poe books, but all of her children's books. So you can find it on that. And if you haven't signed up for our journal, then you can send an email to Carmen, and we can add you to it. So we have different Gothic guests before we have our Poe Unplugged and our Poe casts and stuff. So you can find all her information and find where her works are at. If you don't want to look them up on Amazon, you go directly to her website. So
yes, absolutely. So, and you know, before we do have our Poe Unplugged, you can research, you know, whoever our Gothic guest is going to be on here before joining, and check out their work and things like that. But she's got, you know, with her, especially her book covers, you know, her artwork is displayed beautifully on her website.
Yeah.
So is that the only project that you're working on right now, is the oblong box, or have you got, do you do multiple things at one time?
I'm all over the place. I have a really exciting book for any Mary Shelley fans. I'm doing Frankenstein meets Santa Claus. And the illustrations are like I want to say a cross between like a folk art graphic novel, and that's what I was, my hands cramping. The illustrations on that book are they're beautiful. They're like way more serious. It's based off of the book, not like the cinematic movies. Here's this. I have this pad. I'm working on it. That's a book.
Very cool.
I like Frankenstein.
I can't tell if I'm showing it but like this thing. I mean, the colors are all weird, but just a more fine. I think they're the only ones that are done on those pads, but really,
that is often awesome with the Ravens too.
Yeah. the scene with the wife.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I mean, it's
neat.
hard to
Yeah.
pick up the colors but I mean, it's gonna be a
Yeah.
really cool one once the words go to it.
Oh, very cool.
Oh, yeah. So
Oh, I'm
it's
writing it
like,
Thank you
down.
for sharing that with us. A little sneak peek.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Especially Mary Shelley. She's another awesome writer who
Mm-hmm.
bullied, for lack of a saying word, of all the guys around her and saying, you can't write you can't write a horror story. And she's like, bet me. All right. She
mhm.
also made sure that she published under her own name. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well,
I was
kind of
very proud of that.
the mother of science fiction, really.
That's a great read,
Yes,
Yes,
it
it is.
is.
and it's nothing like the movies portray
No.
it. I mean, I got more out of the book than I did the Frankenstein movies. Although Boris Karloff did great.
Yes.
I've
We
got
watched it recently.
I like the
Yeah.
classics, but the book was really, I was surprised how much it really emotionally I got into it.
Yeah, and I think most of those classic you think of the Universal monsters,
Mhm.
none of the books are like what they've portrayed, which I understand why they did what they did, and I love the movies separate from the books, and the
Correct.
books are all fantastic.
Yes,
Even Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
yes, yes.
Yeah, I love Frankenstein because it's, to me, like, she wrote the horror story because, hey, you build the perfect man and it always comes out screwed up. So, hey, I viewed it. So I was like, all right, there we go. She's my hero.
All right. Well, any last thoughts on the Bells? Oh, well, hold on. Let's see. Hold on. Jay Christensen says, as a teen, amazing. She's been mentioned on a bunch of shows recently, like Wednesday and Midnight Club, a hero. Totally agree. I
Yes.
have not watched Wednesday yet, but my husband and I are going to probably binge watch that soon. We're trying to finish some other
Yeah, I wanna
shows
see that.
first.
You are gonna love it. I
I
binge
can't
watched
wait.
it. I binge watched it in 2 days, and I was
Okay.
like, yeah.
Nice.
Yes, I've heard there's all kinds of Poe connections and things
Yes.
like that, so that's going to be
Yes.
exciting. Yeah, Jeannie, you may have to come over and we binge this together.
Probably, considering I don't watch television anymore. So,
Yeah, true. Yes.
I'm like, yeah, I read.
She
haven't-
takes pride in saying how long her TV has not been on.
Exactly, I do. It
Well,
hasn't been on since 2018. So I'm
Congratulations.
Oh wow.
I mean, I
and
just,
I'm not on any social media
Neither.
either. So
I turned the TV on for Wednesday just because I heard the advertisement
Yes.
come across the computer, and then I'm like,
Oh,
well, I'll sit down and watch this. But most of the time, it's all music's playing, and my face or nose are buried in a book.
yep,
Yes.
there we go.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll
And-
probably have to go to Carmen's house to watch it. So
Oh yes. Well, and kind of coming back to Poe, the movie The Pale Blue Eye is
Mhm.
coming out soon, and I've read the book behind it, and the book is fantastic. And so I think if they've done it like they did, like Louis Bayard did the book, it's going to be fantastic. So just very, very good homage or awesome homage to Poe.
So
well,
the
I've
book's
seen
worth
some of
the
the
investment.
critics. Yeah, some of the critic reviews, because it was came out December for a little bit in select theaters.
Mhm.
Some of the critic reviews have actually come out saying that Christian Bale does a really good job, and it's definitely an homage to Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah. And let's see, Micah says the book had me completely fooled. Can't wait to watch Batman join forces with the creator of the modern detective story. Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Totally agree, Micah. Absolutely. And I agree. Yes, the book had me fooled as well and I'm definitely not going to give away what happens, but it was like, yes, this is awesome ending.
Well, now I've got to go order the book.
Yeah. I listened to it and I can't remember who read it, but whoever the person that did the reading, the voice was so good. And so if you like to listen to books,
Yeah. I
like I
just
think
recently started that.
okay, it's a nice read. I got it on Audible, and so
A Pale
highly
Blue Eye.
recommend. Yes, The Pale Blue Eye.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Well, any last thoughts on the bells or questions for Holly or anything like that?
I do have one thing to say.
Yeah.
You know, with my daughter, we always look for weird, like odd children's books, and now she's unfortunately 17, but I still look for kids books because I love like odd illustrations and stuff. And one of the things I appreciated when Holly made her series, which is one of the things I get spoiled when she hits me up, she said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" I like the fact that in comparison, because I was one of those weird parents, I always looked for really odd books for my daughter, like the Halloween ones that were creepy. And, you know, there weren't a lot when she was young, like inspired by really well-known, writers. And I really like the fact that I call it the Poe essence, that she really kept the Poe essence, because even a lot of new stuff that now people are really into Poe, so you have them available to you for kids, but a lot of them made it more baby like, where I feel like Holly's always has that eerie factor, which I was like looking for when my daughter was young and I just couldn't find it. So I really appreciate she still kind of keeps that darkness, and even though her illustrations are colored, they're like dulled down in comparison to, you know, some of the other children's book that have kind of taken Poe and kind of retold a story, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really good note to talk about that, because I know just how I was as a child, and that would have appealed to me heavily. And that was not available way back in the day. And I really wished it would have been, because I would have read every single one of them and gone, come on, give me some more.
Well, and on that aspect, Holly, I think you did an awesome job with the colors, keeping it very psychological.
Yes.
Yes.
That's one of the reasons that so many of the children's authors I hate to use the words dumb down, but dull down. That's a good way of saying it. Dull down a lot of their stories, is they take away that part of the essence, as Crystal said, the visual.
Mm-hmm.
You know, don't use the reds, don't use the greens, because they invoke different types of emotions in certain children and all that. And a lot of people want to stray away from that. But that's one of the things that grabbed me the most about just the fronts of your books, is the color always draws me before anything else on anything.
Yeah.
I always look at colors. And so just the color of the red devil, you know, it's like, boom, that draws me right there. Because, you know, I am that one of those weird persons, like Crystal says, that I like being drawn to that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it more real. And I like things that are not really, can't be, you know, realistic in some aspects, unless you truly believe in the devil and that kind of thing, and demons. But to me, it's like, hey, it makes it visually real to me. So that's another thing that's great props on that too.
Yes. Yes. Awesome all around.
Yes.
And we thank you so much for joining us, Holly, and talking about your inspiration and just keeping Poe alive, you know, forevermore. I always like to say that, because it's true. And I think more people, I should say, have come to know Poe and all of the different aspects of his writing. It's not just about horror, it's about all kinds of things. And I love that we can just keep him going, and just, for as long as we can. We are going to meet next month for Poe Unplugged on January 24th. And that's a Tuesday. Just want to kind of give everybody a heads up. 7 o'clock Central Standard Time. So I know a lot of everybody on here is Eastern, so that's 8 o'clock. And joining us for that Poe Unplugged, our Gothic guest for January, his name is Jason Markiewicz, and he does like radio style portrayals of Poe's works, kind of like old radio theater style. And so I've listened to a few snippets of some of his work, and we've been talking with him, trying to get everything set up. And so on Poe Unplugged, it's been, Jeannie, how long ago did we talk about the Raven?
It was back at the beginning of the year, I think.
I think
Yeah.
so.
It's like
Yeah,
the
'cause-
very first one. I
I
felt
think
Yeah.
maybe so. Well, we're going to revisit the Raven
Okay.
for January, but look at it through the lens of the horror that comes out of it, those things. And I think before we looked at a different lens. And so so please definitely join us next month. And yeah.
Okay,
Once
okay.
more, the journal will have him as our Gothic guest. We'll have
Yes.
links to his YouTube, his different things that you can check out, along with other aspects of like our podcast and other things like different announcements we make when we hear about anything with Poe. I know Carmen and I in April are going to be at the Steampunk
Yes.
Poe-esque. That's going to be where, Baltimore?
It's in Baltimore.
Yeah, I think so.
It's the Telltale Steampunk Festival in Baltimore, and it's going to be on April 1st and
Yes.
2nd. I can't remember what hotel it's at, but we will be putting that in our journal, and so you'll be able to see that. But yeah, so Jeannie and I are going to be traveling together to that, and so we're really excited about it. And we're working on some merchandise that's going to have that steampunk factor with Poe, and so kind of really pulling out things of his, like the balloon hoax and things like that. The what is it? I'm going to butcher the title, but it's like the Adventures of Hans Fall. I can't remember exactly, like off the top of my head. So.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, it's another balloon tale.
But yeah, so pay attention to any of those, and we will continue to push it as closer we get. And Keith, since you're up in the Virginia way, we'll wave as we go by if you want to pop up to Baltimore to see us. And
Yeah,
Well, thank you.
Jersey, you can come down.
Actually, I've got time on my hands for a lot of things now, so.
Woohoo! That's cool.
Yeah.
And Micah being in California is kind of going to be difficult unless you're on the East Coast or something.
yes.
Leela, I think, is up in DC area.
Yeah, I am. So yeah, maybe I'll try to come. Sounds good.
It sounds like
Okay.
fun.
And then Jay Christensen, what area are you in?
Yes, Micah, the commute would be a horrible problem for you.
Yes, yeah, he just commented on that.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, so okay, Northern Virginia. So
Oh,
yeah, so
nice.
that's not too far from Baltimore. So
Baltimore. Yeah. So we could, might see people or just wave as we go by saying, hey, we might, hey, here we go.
absolutely.
Now, unless we drive or fly, and if the flights keep screwing up the way they are, we might end up having to drive. But
Yeah. Oh yeah.
it's not really a bad trip. But yeah, once more, Holly, we thank you for joining us. We enjoyed
Yes.
Thank you.
And
Thank you both.
Yes, thank you. Very interesting.
Yes, thank you. It was great.
Yes, this was really enjoyable. So
Mhm.
all right. Well, thank you, everybody. And, we're in the middle of Christmas and New Year. And so happy holidays to everybody. Please enjoy your new year. And we really enjoyed having everybody on here. Micah says, thank you, Holly and Carmen. So good to see everyone. Happy holidays.
Yep.
And so have a fantastic new year. And we can't wait to see you again in 2023.
All right,
Yep.
everyone have a great
Bye,
new
everybody.
year.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
See you next
Bye.
time.
Happy New Year.
All right. Yes.
You want to stop recording?
Yes.
Okay.